You fool! Warren is dead.
Welcome to HorrorBabble. I'm pleased to return today with a recent discovery. The first of 4 stories concerning a curious ghost hunter by the name of Mark Shadow, in terror of laughing clay. Written by the Scottish author Robert W. Sneddon, the story first appeared in the October 1926 edition of Ghost Stories. No scientists experimenting 10,000 years could make a lump of potter's clay live. And yet, I hope you enjoy this little gem, folks. In Terror of Laughing Clay by Robert W. Sneddon. I whistled softly as I read the name on the card. I had met John Ralston several times, but never on a friendly footing, for his antagonism to anything pertaining to occultism extended to those who affected any interest in the subject. He was prepared to back his opinion on ghosts with a standing offer of $10,000 to anyone who could convince him that there was anything more than fake and trickery in the phenomena of the supernatural. And no one had ever won the $10,000. I have devoted myself to a study of those occult occurrences, so apparently mysterious and in most instances not to be explained, but which I am convinced we shall in time discover to be natural in their operation. In fact, what started as the hobby of an amateur has developed into a profession, and I am called upon to investigate many instances of so-called hauntings. The name of Mark Shadow is familiar to research societies both here and in Europe, though no doubt most of you read it here for the first time. I was surprised to get Ralston's card as I sat in the study of my little house in West 11th Street. He was the last man likely to call on me, and I was puzzled as to what could have brought him, but I told my secretary to show him in at once. Ralston strode in, aggressive, heavy of tread. Only his manner lacked something of its usual arrogance. "I dare say you're surprised to see me, Mr. Shadow," he said brusquely. "In fact, I'm surprised myself. But once started on the damn fool business, I decided to go on. You busy now?" "Not particularly," said I. "You don't want to consult me professionally?" "We've had several tilts in the past, Shadow," he answered with forced familiarity. "But forget that. You're the sanest of the crew. That's why I picked on you to hear my story." "Much obliged," I said with a grin. "What's your trouble?" "I want a plain talk with you, as man to man. You can charge what you want, so long as you can solve a problem or two to my satisfaction." He drew out a checkbook and bent forward to my desk. "No hurry," I said curtly. The man had an unfortunate method of approach. "Time enough for that, Mr. Ralston. Any advice I can give you is at your service, though judging from the past, I fear it won't be appreciated." "Oh, I know," he answered, taken aback. "But we'll let bygones be bygones. This is too serious a matter for quibbling over opinions. I don't retreat one step from my convictions, but I own I'm puzzled to death. There's some trickery going on in my home, and I want to get at the root and bottom of it." "Serious, eh?" "So serious that my wife's a nervous wreck. I've had to dismiss my servants, close up my home, and come to town. The house is new. I only moved in last year, and I don't know if I'll ever get my wife to set foot in it again. She wanted me to consult her cousin Carver." "Carver? You don't mean Professor Joseph Carver?" "The same. Damned, opinionated, self-deluded fool. Talking about ghosts. Bah! There are no ghosts." It amazed me to hear the name of Carver, a cranky dabbler in dark matters that are best left alone, even by those well informed in them. "What's the matter with the house?" I asked. I want you to find out, Shadow. There's something in it that's making it impossible to live in. Oh, it's nothing supernatural. Don't get that idea into your head. Then why come to me? Why not get a detective? He gave me a snort of contempt. I've had 3 of them already. 2 of them couldn't find a thing. The third lit out in the middle of the night and sent me a crazy note saying he could stand up against anything he saw, but not against something out of hell. Now, I want you to come out and see what sort of a trick is being played on me. You believe the house is haunted? I believe nothing of the sort, he retorted. Someone is trying to put something over on me. Somebody's after my $10,000 offer, though how they got in to rig up their contrivances beats me. I'll give you a free hand. You can go as far as you like. I hesitated. I foresaw that, notwithstanding this offer, in whatever I did I would have a wholly unsympathetic assistant. Ralston leaned forward. See here, Shadow. Ever since you exposed that medium in Vienna, I have had some respect for your judgment. You have some critical faculty, more than I can say for most of them. If there's trickery, you'll find it. If there's anything more, I'll listen to what you have to say. Now, will you take the case? If you would be more explicit. I was still hesitating. I'll tell you all you want after you're on the ground. I'd like to see if you can get an inkling yourself first. Oh, very well. I'll wait till we're on the spot. You'll come then? He said, standing up with an evident air of relief. Why, yes. Good. There's a train at Grand Central, 5:10. Will that suit you? Bring a bag with you. I met him at the station with my bag, and in my pocket a flashlight and an automatic. We got out at Green Farms and walked a few hundred yards to a pretentious house on the shore of the Sound, set deep in its grounds and bordered on either side by other miniature estates. He unlocked the front door and switched on the lights as we entered a wide hall with walls of wood paneling. We'll have a bite to eat in the dining room, he said. I brought a lunch basket with me. Hang your things up on the rack there while I start the percolator. He went into the dining room, and I heard a clatter of plates and cutlery. I walked towards the lighted door, and as I did so I halted, with a decided sensation of shrinking. I looked about me sharply, and found I was standing opposite a large chest of some dark wood. Prompted by an impulse, I raised the heavy lid and peered inside. It was empty, but from it came a curious damp odor, almost like that of moist earth or clay. I let the lid fall with a start. "Did you laugh, Ralston?" I asked sharply. There was no reply, and I took a couple of strides into the dining room. As I did so, Ralston came from the kitchen beyond with a tray. "Did you laugh, Ralston?" I repeated. He flashed a mirthless glance at me. "No," he said curtly. "So you heard it, did you? Quick work." "I heard a laugh, muffled, I confess, but a laugh," I said. "Near the old chest?" "Yes." "A mocking, snickering laugh?" "Yes, that describes it exactly." "You've started well, Shadow," he said, as he laid the tray on the table. "Here, have one, won't you?" He poured a glass out for himself and gulped it down. "Thanks, no. I prefer to keep my head clear." "Oh, all right. What's your idea? Something to do with the chest? Some sort of radio attachment? Though I've examined every inch of the chest and the woodwork of the hall." I said nothing till we sat down. "Where did you get the chest?" "Came from some old house around here. My wife picked it up." "I'd like to know its history." He made a gesture of impatience. "No offense, Shadow, but don't pull any stuff about old furniture retaining the atmosphere of some dark crime. The thing does exist, for all you profess not to believe in it," I said firmly. "However, I promise you I won't let that theory stand in the way of investigation. I have a feeling that the mystery starts from the chest, but, if you don't mind, I'm ready to hear your account of what has been going on." "I'll give it to you without any frills. Just a plain, bold statement of the facts, he answered. The business began 2 weeks ago. My wife and I were sitting in that room across the hall, her drawing room. It was about 10:30 at night, and we were waiting for the maid to bring us some ginger ale. All at once, we heard her shriek in the hall. Smash went the tray, and she dived in here in hysterics, swore that as she was passing the chest, the lid went up of its own accord and something looked at her, something hideous with staring eyes. She couldn't describe it. She gave a squawk, the lid dropped down, and she bolted to us screaming. I gave her a piece of my mind, dragged her out to the hall, opened the chest, and showed her it was empty. But it was no use. She stuck to her story, much to my wife's amazement. Hilda had been so reliable. German girl? No, Swedish and stolid as they make 'em. Good servant, too. That finished her. She left next day, though my wife foolishly offered to increase her wages. That night, as I went up to bed, I heard the laugh. I thought the butler was responsible. He waited up to lock up the house, and I thought he and the chauffeur were having some fun in the kitchen. In there, so I paid no attention. But a couple of nights later at dinner, I said to my wife when the butler was out of the room, "Did you notice anything about Rollins?" "I was wondering if you noticed it," she said. "He's acting so oddly, looking over his shoulder out into the hall." "Scared," I said. "That damn Swedish girl has got his nerve." But I didn't expect he'd ask for his wages next day. "What's the trouble, Rollins?" I asked. "I'm a pretty decent master, Shadow. I treat my servants fair and square. Anything that can be remedied? I don't want to lose you, Rollins," I told him. I couldn't get anything out of him. Mama's the grave, but he did loosen up to Madam before he left. "Tell the master to look out for that chest in the hall. He don't believe in ghosts, I know, but there's something dead wrong with the chest," he said to her. My wife asked him to come out with it, but he seemed scared to say more. I got another fellow at once, Englishman, looked a hearty, well-fed, sober-minded man, been through the war and everything. Of course, I never piped a word to him about the chest. I'd examined the thing again and couldn't find anything out of the ordinary about it. Ralston stopped short. He shot a strange look at the door. "Hear anything, Shadow?" I listened quietly. "No." "Damn funny," said Ralston with a frown. "Sounded like a stone being pulled out of mud. Sort of a plop, you know. Well, about Bell, that was his name. He came into the drawing room about 11 to ask if we wanted anything more for the night, and then went out to the hall. Suddenly I heard a commotion, a kind of scuffling, and then a thud. I dashed out to the hall, and there lay Bell on his back in a dead faint, or it looked mighty like that to me. But when I bent over him, he gave a groan, sprang to his feet, nearly knocking me off my pins, and squared his fists. "Here, here," I said sharply. "None of that. Come to, you've been drinking, my man." He dropped his arms and stared at me, and then began to shudder all over. "Are you drunk?" I asked again, though he had acted quite normally in the drawing-room. "So help me God, I haven't had a drop in this house, sir." "Then what the devil is the matter with you?" I inquired. "It's this way," he said, fidgeting about and edging away. "I was coming along, and I barged into the chest here, and all at once the lid goes up, and a hand grabs me by the leg and tries to pull me into the chest. So I puts up a fight, and then something wet and horrid like a slab of mud gets me right in the face, and I goes down, gasping for breath." I stared at him. Then I smelt his breath. Not a sign of liquor. "It's God's own truth, sir. It came out of this here chest." "Nonsense, Bell," I said to him. "You don't expect me to believe that." And I lifted up the chest lid. Ralston stopped and blinked. "Yes," I prompted him. "Empty, I suppose?" "Yes." He paused and added in a carefully lowered voice, "Where in the hell it came from, I can't imagine. But there was a muddy mark on the lid. Like, well, all I can describe it as. It was like the imprint of the palm of a hand and a great thumb, exaggerated, fully a foot across. I slammed down the lid quick. "Here, my man," I said to Bell. "You get to bed, and not a word to any of the other servants, see? I'll make it worth your while." He promised and went off looking sick. When he went, I lifted the lid again. The mark was gone without a trace. I shut the lid down, and then I heard the laugh, mocking me, snickering at my having bitten. How Bell's hallucination had been communicated to me, I don't know. All I knew was I was being played with by some clever tricksters. Was there any smear of mud on Bell's face? None. Oh, I looked. I took no chances. I told my wife Bell had fallen over the chest. You said your wife was suffering from nerves. Yes, jumping at her own shadow. The final stroke which broke her courage was delivered 2 days ago. Seems about 5 o'clock in the afternoon she went out to the hall to switch on the lights. By this time we had only 2 servants left to us. Bell had gone, and the 2 housemaids. All we had was the chauffeur and our cook, his wife. So my wife had all sorts of odd jobs to do. She noticed that the lid of the chest was up, and thought the cook had been doing some volunteer cleaning, and neglected to shut down the chest. So she went to put down the lid. When she saw what was in it, she fainted clean away. No one heard her, and she has no idea how long she lay. But when she came to, she almost passed out with fright again, and it took all her strength to get as far as the kitchen. I heard the story when I came home. Yes, what did she see, or suppose we say, what did she think she saw? The chest was full, something in it that occupied every inch of it and swelled up over the edge, a soft, messy substance that kept rising. And in the midst of it 2 horrible eyes that glared at her, and then a great, shapeless, shadowy hand and arm began to rear out of the mass. It was then she keeled over. I tried to talk her out of her imagination, but she stuck to her story, and the long and short of it was that she insisted on clearing out that night. Now, what the devil do you make of it all? Collective hallucination, eh? I could have given Ralston an explanation of sorts there and then, but I knew it would be useless. The man would have to be convinced by some other method. I'd like to look into the matter myself, I said. Suppose I sit up and keep watch tonight, Ralston. I think I noticed a billiard table in a room as we came in. We'll play a game or 2, and then you can go off to bed while I hold the fort. I'd just as soon be alone. Well, it's your party, I guess. All right, we'll go to my den, Shadow. We played several games, and then Ralston left me to my own devices. I extinguished the lights in the hall, all but one dimmed light just over the beginning of the staircase, moved an easy chair to the doorway of the den, and sat down where I could keep my eye on the chest. I saw that my flashlight was in order, and that I had a cartridge up in the automatic chamber. I lit a pipe and sat, half dozing. It was about 1:30 by a tall grandfather's clock when I received my first signal of warning, that prompting of an inward voice which says, "Be wary, be ready." There was a faint sound like the insistent trickling of water, and almost before I could fully realize the sight, the lid of the chest rose swiftly, hung open for an instant, then closed again noiselessly. Whatever had been within was now at large in the silence of the night. The trickling sound had ceased. I could hear nothing but the ticking of the clock and my own breathing. I was aware, however, of a new odor in my nostrils, that of earth, dampened earth or clay, and the skin of cheeks and brow cooled as though a mist-laden breeze was wafted toward them. I sat staring, concentrated, alert. It seemed to me that a shadow upon the wood panels was expanding into a monstrous swollen shape, roughly that of a man, or rather a huge gorilla. I kept my attention fixed upon this, for there is more lurking in a shadow than the ordinary man suspects, and well it is for the peace of mind that this is so. It is too often the concealing vehicle of an aspect of horror. But before I could form any definite opinion, this shadow disengaged itself from the wall. In a flash it had passed me, and with grotesque but formidable rapidity was upon the wall of the staircase. It vanished. I sprang from my chair and followed. I fumbled for the switch by the door, but quick as I was, the thing that went before was quicker. I heard Ralston shout my name, and then his voice thinned to a shrill squeak like that of a hunted rabbit. I reached the landing in a leap, and guided by the choking sound coming from one of the several open doors, darted forward. At that instant, there fell on my ears a voice which, with a sensation of utter bewilderment, I recognized. It was the voice of Professor Carver, saying in low but perfectly audible tones, "Which of us is right now, Ralston?" Some heavy object landed at my feet, as though flung by a gigantic hand. I was hurled against the jamb of the door by the rushing contact of an unwieldy mass. I felt it, but it was wholly invisible. For an instant I fumbled for the switch, gasping for breath. Then the light glowed in the bulbs. The room was empty but for Ralston. As I bent over him, thinking him dead, he groaned, then stumbled up to his feet, clawing at his throat. "My God, that you, Shadow? Did you stop him? See here, this is murder, murder no less. Caught me by the throat and slung me to the floor." "Do you mean Carver?" I asked gravely. "Yes, couldn't see him, but I felt him, heard him. Did you hear him?" "Yes, but you're mistaken in thinking Carver was here in person. I'm going to tell you something, believe it or not as you will. I'm afraid Carver, in order to convince you of the truth of something you denied, has projected himself into the shell of some vile thing he has materialized. Please answer me one question. At any time, did you have an argument with Carver on his pet subject?" "The last time Carver was here," said Ralston reluctantly. "Had to invite him occasionally, on account of the relationship. The fellow had the blatant rudeness to try and thrust his opinions down my throat at my own dinner table. I got pretty hot under the collar. And well, if it hadn't been for my wife's presence, he had never quite gotten over her taking me instead of him. I swear to God I'd have smashed his smirking face in. As it was, he wouldn't stay overnight, as had been arranged. He went off livid with fury. Then, if Carver is your enemy, Ralston, there's no time to lose. You're in danger so hideous that it will scarcely bear contemplation. We're dealing with an elemental, a destroying force so terrible under the influence of a revengeful man that there is no safety for either of us now, until it is cast back into the darkness from which it was summoned. We must see Carver at once and bring him to his senses. Can we get a car at this hour?" "I have a car in the garage still," answered Ralston, keeping his eyes on my face like a frightened child. "I can't believe it. I can't drive, Shadow. I'm all shot to pieces." "I'll drive," I told him. "We'll start now. Every minute is precious." Carver has an old house a mile this side of Darien, and well off the main road. When we drove up, there was a light in the window of a lower room, though the shade was down. I knocked loudly at the door without getting any response. "That's odd," said Ralston into my ear. "He used to have a servant. Carver must hear us. There's a light in that room." We went round to the back door. I tried the handle softly, and was surprised to find the door was unlocked. We passed through the kitchen into a dark little hall. I called Carver's name several times. At the last summons there sounded behind us a mocking chuckle, and I had just time to shout a warning to Ralston when the thing was upon us, returned to the house of its birth. An enormous and palpable but invisible something filled the narrow passageway. I had the sensation of being overwhelmed by a mass of mud which flowed on and over me, leaving me gasping. Behind me, I heard Ralston splutter, and then, just as I thought I had reached the limit of my endurance, a door against which my back was pressed opened to the strain, and I toppled inside. I was in the room in which burned the light. I sprang to my feet, drew my automatic, and looked sharply about me. Carver was not to be seen. Ralston stumbled in, gasping, and caught my arm. "My God! It's the hellish thing of the chest!" I shouted. We both stood staring at the extraordinary object on the table. Upon a wooden table was a grotesque little mannequin of yellow clay, into the head of which were stuck 2 bits of looking-glass eyes. Over its head was a funnel, in which was a piece of sponge, apparently kept moist by the fluid which trickled to it through a pipe arrangement. Once in a while, a drop would fall on the figure. The miniature, the model of the thing he materialized into the abominable and hellish enlargement we encountered, I said. As he made no reply, I turned my head. He was staring out into the hall. I laid my hand gently on his arm, and as I did so, he let out an appalling shriek. "It's coming again!" I turned my gaze sharply to the door. Against the darkness of the hall were 2 monstrous eyes, phosphorescent with a strangely dead gleam. I had a momentary glimpse of a huge form, shapeless but repulsively reminiscent of the hideous image on the table, and quick as a flash I leveled my automatic not at the menacing shape invading the room, but at its material representation on the table. With my shot, the image spattered to its original clay. But the horrors of the night were not yet exhausted. As the shot rang through the room, from behind a closed door nearby came an inhuman screech. The door was slowly swinging open. Exposed to our fascinated gaze was an object so ghastly that I was not surprised to feel my skin creeping with horror. Within the closet hung a dangling thing, a rope about its neck, the corpse of Carver. His toes swayed a few inches above an overturned stool. It was plain to see to what disastrous end the intensity of evil concentration had led. He had taken his own life. I heard Ralston whisper, "Dead," while his spirit came and went in that abominable shape. I set my teeth grimly and went forward. The body was stone cold. Carver had been dead for days. I turned sharply. Ralston, his hands before his face to shut out the hideous spectacle, was stumbling like a blind man to the door. I dragged him out of that unholy house, helped him into the car, and turned its bonnet toward New York and sanity. 2 days later, I received a tacit admission that Ralston had experienced a change of conviction. Enclosed in an envelope was his check for $10,000. If you enjoyed listening today, be sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting the red subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to receive new content notifications. If you'd like to support our work and receive exclusive perks, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. To support us in other ways, see the video description for links to our Bandcamp and Patreon pages, our merch store over at Teespring, and further information relating to our releases on Audible, iTunes, and Spotify. And until next time.